Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our January 2022 breakfast. Happy New Year. It's good to see you all. I know we still have people that are going to be joining us, but we are going to get started. So again, welcome to our January breakfast. My name is Karen King. I work in the Office of New Haven Affairs at Yale University. And our breakfast hosts these meetings once a month during the academic year. We host them typically on the first Thursday of the month, with exceptions as noted, as today is one of those. In order for you to stay up to date on who will be speaking and when our breakfast will be held, I suggest that you sign up for our newsletter. I will put that link in the chat so that you can stay apprised of when our breakfast will be held, among other things, because we do send out messages from time to time throughout the month. I have a few announcements before we get started, and I'm going to share my screen. So the first announcement is January is a huge celebration month for Yale University in terms of celebrating the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. One of the highlights of the month is the Peabody Museum of Natural History celebration series. They have moved to virtual, as we all. They kicked off their celebration yesterday. They have 3 more days of celebration. I will put this information in the chat. I suggest you join. It is all virtual as well. It's always a great inspirational time to listen, learn, and participate with our neighbors. As always, I will share the Yale's COVID-19 information site. This posts a ton of information that's updated on a very regular basis in terms of what our status is on campus, what our health guidelines are, what our testing data shows. So if you have any questions about how we are managing information, sharing information, and how we are working on campus and with our neighbors to help mitigate the flow of COVID-19 in any iteration, please use this website as the first stop. The New Haven Hire Initiative is constantly looking out for New Haven residents to join us on the Yale University, in the Yale University community. There are positions available. I will put a link in the a link in the chat so that you can subscribe to the newsletter so that you can stay up to date on what is available, and that you can reach out also to the mighty team of the Yale New Haven Hiring Initiative. One last thing I want to mention is the university hosts a keynote speaker every January in celebration of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This year, our keynote speaker will be Majora Carter. She's going to be speaking from her book and amongst other things. Her book is titled Reclaiming Your Community. She'll be joining us on January 26th at 6:30 p.m. I will send out the Zoom link for that once it is generated. So I would highly suggest that you, if you haven't done it so already, subscribe to the Office of New Haven Affairs newsletter so that you can get that information. And now we are on to our wonderful speaker. So this month's speaker is Dr. Joliana Yee. Dr. Joliana Yee's tenure as Assistant Dean of Yale College and Director of the Asian American Cultural Center at Yale began in January 2018. She has a decade of experience in U.S. higher education administration at both small and large public and private institutions in the Midwest and Northeast regions. As a critical race practitioner and scholar, Dr. Yee's dedication to centering equity and justice issues in her work stem from her own re-racialization experiences as an Asian international undergraduate student. Born and raised in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Dr. Yee is a first-generation college student who earned her PhD in higher education from Loyola University in Chicago, her master's in higher education and student affairs from Indiana University, and her bachelor's in economics and political science from Miami University. She recently completed her term as co-chair for the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators Asian Pacific Islander Knowledge Community. Outside of work, Dr. Yee enjoys running, outdoor activities, and her husband's gourmet home cooking. You're gonna have to hire him out for saying that. So please help me welcome Dr. Joliana Yee.
Thank you so much, Karen. Good morning, everyone, and happy 2022. It's hard to believe that we're actually already in the middle of January. Where is time going? And thank you so much, Karen, for extending this invitation to me and allowing me to be a part of this long tradition of community breakfasts and at Yale. And hopefully, maybe someday we'll be able to do it in person again. I'm going to share my screen really quickly before we get started. Okay, great. So as Karen so generously introduced me, I'm Joliana Yee. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm currently zooming in from my guest bedroom. So I hope that wherever all of you are, that you are in good spirits and hopefully in good health as well, as we know that is not something we can take for granted these days. Before I get started though, I definitely wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge the lands on which we are settled upon. We are obviously coming from many physical locations today, and we want to acknowledge the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples who have been here since time immemorial, and to recognize that we must continue to build our solidarity and kinship with Native peoples across the Americas and across the globes. Yale and the Asian American Cultural Center, located in New Haven, Connecticut, acknowledges that Indigenous peoples and nations, including the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Pagasit, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac and other Algonquin-speaking peoples have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. I also want to acknowledge that this country would not exist if it were not for the free enslaved labor of Black people. And if it's not for these communities, we would not be here and this institution would not exist. And so I just want to take a moment to honor that in this space before we kind of dive in to the presentation portion. So thank you all for showing up at 8 a.m. on a Friday, showing up for yourself and also just showing up in support of this topic that I'm about to discuss. And so I look forward to the Q&A portion as well. So I don't plan to talk the entire time. And just to give y'all a brief overview of what I hope to cover in our time together is to really just ground us around the term Asian American. I think, you know, when we use the term, people might come at it from all walks of lives. So I just wanted to ground us there historically. And then I'll spend a little bit of time giving you a sense of the AACC, its history. I have a quick video that we've created that will probably be more exciting than me just talking at you. And then I'll give you a little bit of context about how, you know, we're operating in these very unusual times and how New Haveners have in the past engaged with the AACC. And then I'll close us out with just a little bit about a brief, very high level overview of the Asian American experience today. Because as you know, each of these things could be a semester long or year long course. And so I'll just do my best to kind of give us some things to chew on today. And I look forward to your questions as well. So where are the origins of Asian American coming from? I always love to cover this in any presentation that I give because I think it's something that is not often known or talked about because of how the term is used today, right? Today, it's usually on a census form and you check that box. But what most people don't understand is it was never actually a term that was coined by the government. Being Asian American, the term Asian American was actually coined by Asian Americans for Asian Americans in 1968. And its first recorded usage was actually by Yuji Ichioka and Emma G. They were both graduate students at the University of California in Berkeley in 1968. And the original Asian American movement really came about through the civil rights movement. And it was inspired by the Black Power movement and the need for Asian American born communities who had historically fought for their claim to citizenship to build unity with the Black Power movement and the Third World Liberation Front. Those are all, again, larger contexts that we don't have time for me to get into, but certainly make note of those things. And I would encourage you to look into it if you don't already know about the Third World Liberation Front. But in an effort to unite people of Asian ethnicities in the US, which at that time, given the immigration patterns, were specifically Japanese, Chinese, and Filipino American students on the UC Berkeley campus. So this term was conceived as a way to lay claim to being American while also honoring our difference from whiteness. So prior to 1960s, Asian Americans really just identified with their familial ancestral origins. So, whatever country they're from. So for me, I'm from Malaysia, so that would be the larger identifier rather than the term Asian American. And prior to the term Asian American existing, these individuals from Asia would be referred to as Oriental, or the term Asiatics were used broadly. So even when I came to the US in 2006 for my undergraduate, degree, that term Oriental was still being used by some individuals in the Midwest. And they asked, does this offend you? And I'm like, yes, that's a term we use for items, not people. And so the term Asian American really signal a shared and interconnected history of immigration, labor exploitation, and racism, as well as a common political agenda. It was also a way to push back against the pejorative word Oriental. And the US Census actually didn't use the term Asian American until the 1980s. And so, I think it's really key to remember that this term is, as much as it's now seen as just a racial category, was really a political one. And it was inspired by the Black Power movement and the protests against the Vietnam War that were happening at the same time. And Yuji and Emma, who are pictured in the top right corner, that's obviously them much older. That was not how they looked like when they were graduate students. But they were also the individuals that co-founded the first Pan-Asian American political group on their campus. And it was called the Asian American Political Alliance. And so rather than describing our personality, rather than describing our personally felt identities or describing our family histories, the term Asian American really expresses an idea. It's an idea that as Asian Americans, we have to work together to fight for social justice and equality, not only for ourselves, but for all the people around us. And so I think I just wanted to share that very brief history, because I think that's often lost, even amongst our own Asian American community, because the lack of contextual and I think the lack of history in the U.S. classrooms around how these terms come about, and I think that's also an intentional omission from our classrooms. So with that, to kind of further ground us, right, like who are we talking about when we talk about Asian Americans? I think oftentimes people envision, or when I say Asian American, people, the first image that comes to mind is probably someone of East Asian descent. And that's largely because of the immigration patterns in the US, right? A lot of the early Asian immigrants were from East Asia, but today that looks very, very different. And so broadly speaking, Asian Americans are people who can trace their roots to countries throughout East Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. And so this image is just to give you a visual sense of how migration looks, right? And it's not just one way, but really kind of a lot of movement. And this is just, a 5-year kind of capture. And I think, oftentimes the term, like the diversity of our community is obscured by the broad definition of Asian and Asian American. It is really a staggering diversity of people that represent 24 distinct groups. And while the push and pull idea is the dominant way in which immigration is framed to America, that is just part of the story. Asian immigration has been particularly tied to the US presence in Asia. Colonial and military occupations in the Philippines, Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia also brought Asians to the US as colonial subjects, military brides, adoptees, and refugees. So US-Asian international relations continue to really affect both Asian immigration patterns and the treatment of Asian Americans in the US. And I think that's something I'll come back to towards the end when I'm talking about the Asian American experience today. But I always like to kind of emphasize that because it's not always by choice that people come to the US or immigrate to the US. And I think with the recent refugee crisis in Afghanistan, that's just a very recent example of how this is true. So shifting gears a little bit, and if I'm going too fast, please slow me down. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit to now that we're all grounded in a more historical understanding of the term Asian American and who Asian Americans are. I wanted to shift gears to the AACC, which I've had the pleasure of serving as the director for the last 4 years. And I've gotten to see the AACC in so many different iterations. COVID has certainly thrown us for a loop, as I know it has affected many of you all as well. So I'm just going to play this video and then talk a little bit more. But this video will essentially give you a sense of the space, its history, how it came about, and some of the main functions of it today. Oh, okay. I was wondering if sound was an issue. Let me fix that really quick. Apologies. You would think after a year of Zooming that I would remember to click share sound. All right, I think this should resolve the issue.
The Cultural Center at Yale is one of 34 in the country and the oldest of its kind in the Ivy League. It exists largely as a result of Asian American student-led efforts to rally for a space on campus and remains today as a symbol of resistance, student activism, and institutional recognition of Asian American students' distinct needs. The AACC and the 3 other cultural centers at Yale, the Afro-American Cultural Center, affectionately known as the House, La Casa Cultural Julia de Burgos, and the Native American Cultural Center, were founded decades apart yet in conversation with each other. Asian American students drew inspiration from Black student activism that led to the House being established in 1969. In the years leading up to 1981, students from the Asian American Students Alliance and MECHA banded together to press the administration to give them the keys to 295-297 Crown Street, a structure that had previously housed the psychology department. With the added advocacy of key Yale administrators like Dr. Maria Martha Chavez Brumel, who later went on to be the founding director, the Asian and Chicano American Cultural Center at Yale was established in 1981. The three-level building was shared by Asian American, Chicano, and Native American students, and it is where the AACC remains today. In 1993, the NACC was formally established on the third floor of 295-297 Crown Street and shared the space with the AACC for 2 decades before moving out to their current building at 26 High Street in the fall of 2013. It wasn't until the fall of 1999 when students collectively drafted a proposal for Latinx student unification, only did Chicanx students move into La Casa Cultural, located next door at 301 Crown Street. The visibility and strength of the cultural centers is a testament to the power of student organizing and to those students of color who first carved out homes for themselves at Yale. Here at the AACC, we are committed to honoring and increasing awareness around the vibrant and complex cultures, histories, and experiences that exist within the Asian diaspora. The AACC also plays a key role in ensuring the development of Yale's commitment to its Asian and Asian American communities and in cultivating Asian and Asian American citizen scholars who are rooted in our shared histories and actively striving towards an anti-racist, just future for all. The Center supports over 50 affiliate student organizations, both undergraduate and graduate, which you'll hear a little bit about more later. We also create dozens of campus-wide events and initiatives throughout the academic year, so we are hopeful that you will find something of interest to you. We welcome all students, staff, faculty, alumni, and community members to join us in celebrating our successes and also grappling with issues faced by the Asian diaspora locally, nationally, and globally. We look forward to meeting you at the AACC or somewhere on campus soon.
The AACC employs a team of undergraduate staff coordinators to create a variety of programming and to help keep the center running smoothly. Our programming focuses on the following areas: political and cultural engagement, wellness and mental health, alumni relations, and communications.
By hosting discussions, workshops, and panel events on Asian American history, the Political Action and Education team helps connect students with community-centered political and educational programming. The work and focus evolve constantly alongside with the political landscape, so the Political Action and Education team hosts a myriad of events from workshops to alternative spring break programs.
In light of the need to address mental health among Yale students, the AACC also serves to provide space for students to discuss mental health issues and promote wellness. In past years, they have partnered with professionals to make wellness resources more accessible to students and to cultivate a community to care for itself as much as it cares for others.
That's not all. Our programming is not limited to just current students at Yale. We are also dedicated to maintaining our relationships with Asian and Asian American alumni from Yale. Through alumni panel events, the AACC provides students with a clear-cut advice of knowledgeable alumni while also allowing alumni to retrace memories from their days at Yale. A staple program is the Spring Break Externship, a week-long mini internship that connects Yale students with Yale alumni in various industries, including law, medicine, advocacy, and education.
Are you watching this video? If so, CAD had something to do with it, along with all the other beautiful AACC promotional materials. The communications and design team is committed to promoting community events and celebrating the varied experiences of Asian and Asian American students at Yale through visual design and creative works. They are responsible for creating beautiful promotional materials, 295 Magazine, which is the AACC's annual multimedia creative magazine, the weekly newsletter, videos, social media content, and more.
The AACC First Year Coordinator is an integral part of the AACC staff family. They provide perspectives as first-year students and work with both our AACC Center staff and AACC peer liaisons. They have held memorable community building initiatives, varying from Shin Ramyun study break and boba making night to the first year end of the year barbecue.
Last but definitely not least, we take time to acknowledge and celebrate our community, including the AACC's 40th anniversary, Pan-Asian American Heritage Month, also known as PAM, the Asian American Students Alliance's 50th anniversary, AACC Awards Night, and Asian graduation.
The AACC works with and supports over 50 affiliated student organizations. We start the academic year with our annual AACC Affiliate Org training, inviting new student organizations to the AACC to affiliate and existing student organizations to re-affiliate. This is an opportunity for org leaders to learn about the support the AACC will provide for them, as well as a chance for org leaders to meet one another to build connections and future collaborations. The AACC supports its affiliate organizations in a variety of ways. As a center, we have a robust room reservation system providing several options of rooms and availability for orgs to plan cooking nights, study breaks, workshops, and other socials. In addition to other funding sources on campus, the AACC provides orgs funding through its funding request process, which is done through a rolling basis. There are several ways to help get the word out about an event or initiative for affiliate orgs through the variety of AACC social media and other platforms including Facebook, Instagram, the AACC newsletter, and the AACC website. These are just a few examples of how the AACC can support your student organization, so if you're interested in affiliating, contact us at aacc@yale.edu. If you're interested in getting involved with the AACC or collaborating with us on an initiative, reach out to the AACC student staff and or professional staff, and you can also email aacc@yale.edu. We're looking forward to building community with you.
Okay. Hopefully that short video gave you a good sense of kind of how the AACC exists today. I think it's important, as the earlier part of the video highlighted, to recognize that this space came about due to student advocacy, right, with the support of administrators. And the space did not look the way it looks today. We have a lot more resources today. Myself and Shiraz Iqbal, who you heard in the video, or heard his voice in the video, are the two full-time staffers that support this community and this space. But prior to 2016, it was a one-person show. There was only a director and not an assistant director. So, a lot of the changes and the resources that we have continue to be as a result of student organizing and student advocacy in concert with administrators. So I think how it looked in 1981 when it was first established as the Chicano and Asian American Cultural Center looks very different from today. I've had alum come in and walk through the space and be like, wow, this looks so different. And so I think the shared history of the physical space, I think, is also one that's really unique to Yale and to Yale's history, and speaks to, I think, the student body and kind of their vision. I don't think any of them really thought that this space would exist the way it does, 4 decades later. And I think it's safe to say that, and all of you might know, but I want to say that Asians have been at Yale way longer than 4 decades. Young Wang was the first Asian graduate from Yale in 1854. I can't even wrap my mind around what life looked like at Yale in 1854. But certainly, and Young Wang was also the first Asian to ever graduate from a North American university in 1854. So it's not just a first for Yale, but a first for the country. And I think, not much is recorded about kind of the Asian demographics from 1854 till today. But what we do know is that Yale Asian American, the term Asian American was obviously coined in the late 1960s, and Yale Asian American student organizing really began around the 1966 to 1969 period. And a former student and who has passed away since, Don Nakanishi. It was his activism and the founding of the Asian American Student Alliance in 1969 that really led to the AACC existing in 1981. I don't think it was ever a coincidence that ASA, the Asian American Student Alliance, was founded in 1969. I think students at that time really had a deep political consciousness, a deep sense of political consciousness that was really sparked by the national movements around the Baki case, the Black Panther trials, and the Vietnam War that were kind of all happening in that period. And I think it really sparked a different level of political consciousness that led to a lot more organizing around the Asian American identity in concert with other communities of color, because there were just barely 100 Asian identifying students on campus at that time. Today, Asian Americans are the largest ethnically minoritized population on campus. So that's quite different from when the space was founded. But I think with that comes the different challenge, right, of kind of having a uniform understanding of what Asian American means, or whether on an individual level or on a more campus-wide level. And I think with that, I kind of wanted to share the Asian American experience today. And in this, on this slide, the picture is of a group of students, myself and Shiraz are in it as well, standing in front of our newly installed mural. So for those of you who haven't already been able to go by the AACC in December, I hope you're able to at some point this year. As I mentioned earlier, we are 40 as of 2021. We turned 40. To celebrate our 40th anniversary, we had this beautiful mural commissioned and installed on the outside of the AACC building. So we're located at 295 Crown Street. So this mural actually faces the corners of High and Crown. And so that I figured to include this picture so you can see the mural, but definitely see it in person. It will blow your mind, I have no doubt. And just to see some faces of our beautiful students who are on campus today. But I think part of what continues to inform the work at the AACC is the kind of the ongoing, ever-shifting Asian American experience today. And I say that to say, and thank you, Karen, for sharing the our website link. I say that to say that I think the Asian American experience is a really complex one, I think, as a lot of other racial groups are. But I think given the size, right, this term Asian American is encompassing so many different kind of cultures and ethnicities, a lot of which I'm still learning about, right? Like, I think you might be surprised, like, what? You're the director of the Asian American Culture Center. Shouldn't you know everything and anything? No, absolutely not. I'm still learning every day. Because of the vastness and the richness of the Asian diaspora. And while I named, right, like the main regions being East Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, we have to acknowledge that, the Asian diaspora goes beyond that, right? You can find Asian folks really in any country on the continent, and that in and of itself really shapes their experience. And so I think, it's important to recognize that the Asian American experience today are really shaped by a few major factors, and I'm going to name them here really quickly, and perhaps then we'll go into a Q&A to talk about any questions that you have. But, as you're thinking about the Asian American population today, I think it's really important to keep in mind that familial immigration history plays a huge part in shaping what that looks like. Right. So what am I saying when I say that? For example, myself, right? I came here voluntarily as an international student, ended up staying, right? Ended up meeting the love of my life who cooks me gourmet meals, as you heard during my bio. And I'm now here. So my immigration context is very different, right, from someone who came as a refugee because of war or famine that had led them to flee their country. The context in which they come in is very different compared to maybe someone who's been here also for multiple generations and have maybe their third generation, individual, Asian American. And so I think just within 3 individuals, you just have such a diverse experience, and that really shapes how we show up and how we experience the world and the challenges that we run into and the successes we might have and how we get there. It just looks really different. So I think that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about the Asian American community. The US regional context also has a huge role based on research in shaping Asian American identity, right? So on the individual level, if I grew up in the middle of nowhere, rural Ohio, my understanding of my own Asian American identity will be vastly different from someone who grew up in like San Francisco, Chinatown, for example. And so when you bring all these individuals together on a campus like Yale, for example, they're all coming at a very different vantage point as it relates to being Asian American and what that means, how comfortable they are even identifying with that identity, how salient that is for them. So the U.S. regional context definitely plays a huge part. And then I think ethnic cultural influences are another major factor, for myself, right? Like being Malaysian, I'm ethnically Chinese, but nationality-wise, I'm Malaysian. And so I grew up there for 19 years. So a lot of my roots and kind of my pride, right? Like when I say I'm Malaysian, like I'm really proud of that. It influences how I view the US because growing up in Malaysia, it was a multiracial community as well. And multi-ethnic, it was multi-religious, right? So a lot of my ethnic cultural influences also shape how I enter the Asian American community. And so I would say that that's really key also for a lot of individuals, right? If they grew up in an ethnic enclave where they had access to their cultural celebrations or cultural history and knowledge, so they would show up and be proud about that and know a lot about it. But for students who maybe grew up and did not have access to any sort of community that is tied to their ethnic culture, they just might not really have a frame of reference and maybe feel like they're not Asian enough, right? Like that's often a misperception that students kind of have, like, oh, I have to know X amount about my culture in order to claim the identity. And then the intersectionality piece of identities is really something that shapes the Asian American experience today, right? Like we're obviously not one-dimensional people. We're not just race people. We're gendered people. We're religious people, right? Or people with disabilities. We're multiracial. So I think a lot of that, again, like adds more layers and more complexities to the Asian American identity. And I think something that I mentioned earlier, right, that I'm going to come back to is the global context and its impact on present day lived experiences. I think this in particular is very unique to the Asian American experience. Even, we have students who maybe have never ever stepped foot into their kind of motherland, right? Like maybe their great-great-grandparents came from Japan, but they themselves have never stepped in there. But if anything happened in Japan, it would actually have an experience here on people who identify as Japanese American, right? If we think about the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the Japanese American, which led to Japanese American internment, that is a very, I would say, recent example of how global context has a very real impact on how Asian Americans move through this space. I mean, COVID being the most recent example of how anti-Asian racism kind of rears its ugly head when there is any sort of linkage, right, that this disease is kind of tied to a particular race. I know that like my partner's family-owned Chinese restaurants. And even before the virus showed up or was detected, you know, within the borders of the United States, their restaurants already took a hit. Economically, people stopped showing up, stopped ordering food, because they served Chinese food, and Chinese was immediately linked to China, right? So even though they've never been to China themselves, and they never grew up there. So I think that, you know, global context impact is really unique. And I would want to add that the racial triangulation of Asian Americans within kind of the US racial context is also a really unique one. You know, and what do I mean by that? And there are a lot of scholars out there who have written more extensively about this, but to kind of keep it brief, Asian Americans have, you know, been sort of portrayed as a model minority, right? Certain pockets of the Asian American populations that are doing well have been propped up, and you know, they've been propped up amongst the people of color to say, look, everyone else, you should be like these, you know, racial minority groups. You should be like Asian Americans and do better. And I think that puts Asian Americans in a very precarious situation where we're obviously not white, but then we're also kind of propped up as an example to shame other communities of color for not doing better, because we immigrated here. And I think that is something that we're constantly having to battle and navigate. You know, when it comes to like higher education, it's like affirmative action that has been a mess. And, you know, I think on many fronts, when it comes to you know, communities of color, you know, Asian Americans our data is taken in a way that isn't disaggregated, and that gives an inaccurate picture of the success, the economic success of Asian Americans. Because I can tell you, if you look, if you disaggregate the data and you look at the different ethnic populations, it would tell a much more accurate and different story, and that not everyone is, you know, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And so I think those are things that I just kind of wanted to emphasize and highlight for us as we think about the Asian American population and the AACC. So I think I'm probably close to time and wanted to hand it off to Karen for some Q&A.
Thank you so much. Definitely packed full of information. I definitely learned a lot. We are now opening this up to questions, comments. You are able to unmute yourselves now. You can raise your hands. You can pose a comment or question in the chat. So feel free to get started. I know everyone's shy usually right first thing in the morning because no coffee, you're still eating your cereal.
Good morning. I'd like to ask a quick question. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm a registrar in computer science, and I've noticed that our master's program is overwhelmingly recruited from Asia. And one of the things that I've noticed is there seems to be like I guess geographically, the way students treat their names. And I've noticed there are students who use preferred names. I'm sorry, right? They will use an Americanized name, and I'm always pleasantly surprised when someone actually uses their given name. Can you discuss like what goes on in that thinking when students come here and choose to do that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sabrina. And I, you know, as an international student myself, my name is actually given to me. I have a Chinese name in addition to like the name that I use, which is Joliana. And I think there's a variety of things going through students' minds, especially when they're coming from a country where, you know, English is not the primary language being spoken. And I think a large part of it is just not wanting people to butcher their names. Yeah, people get tired of having to kind of, so in anticipation, I think of, their names being quote unquote difficult to pronounce by English speakers, they just do that. And so I think part of it is that, part of it is, maybe the messaging they've gotten around assimilating, which I think is wrong. You shouldn't have to change your name to be accepted, but that's perhaps the messaging that they're getting before arriving. So they choose that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I've seen students who come, they change their name, and then maybe a couple years down the road, they decide
Go back.
to actually be comfortable using their given name. But I think it's one less thing for them to have to worry about, having their names mispronounced, because there's enough to navigate as an international student in a foreign country. So whatever it is that they need to do to be comfortable, I think I try to be supportive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Michelle.
To add to Sabrina's question, there's also, or I learned that when you're really saying someone's name, that the name that we're calling them by is really their last name and not their first name, because I guess that's the way, it's done in your country. And so we're really kind of insulting you in a way.
I think are you specifically talking about Chinese names?
Yes.
Yeah, because obviously the Chinese language is like completely flipped. So like Yee is my family name, and if you would write my name in Chinese, my family name actually comes first, like you said, and then my given name. So it's not an insult. I think it's, a family name is one you carry with pride. So it's more of just like clarifying, and it's just having to relearn. I mean, when you have to learn a new language altogether, there are a lot of grammar rules that change. So I would just ask, like, how do you pronounce your name, or rather than assume. But I get that all the time still today when I go to TSA and they're checking my passport. They're like, wait, which is your name? And I just have to explain it. So it's, to this day, it's still a thing. And that's, I think, where exposure is really important, rather than, like, oh, I insulted you. It's more like, can I ask questions and hope to get it right, or honor the names that are given to you. But yeah, I think we, it's something that to a certain extent, as an international student, I expect it, because I'm in a different country, and people are going to have to learn, and I'm going to have to explain over and over again. It can be a bit exhausting, but at the same time, it is an opportunity for, kind of cultural and knowledge exchange.
Yeah, but it's definitely something we need to learn as Americans. So yeah, okay. And I have one more question. The Chinese New Year. Now, oh God, a few years ago, somehow I got a schedule of the Chinese New Year celebrations.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite lovely. There was a live performance that was, I think, on Hill House Avenue. I think that's where I was. And then, of course, you have the Chinese New Year parade, but we don't see anything about that anymore. And I think that's something that should be publicized more. We are, New Haven is a community of all different cultures. And one of the ways for our kids, and even us as adults, to learn other cultures and respect them is to be exposed to them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I think the parade is something done by the Yale China organization, which is not a Yale, it's a Yale affiliated institution. It's not something that the ACC puts on, but I agree. I think just due to COVID, it hasn't been, possible. I do want to clarify that Chinese folks aren't the only ones celebrating the New Year. So I tend to try to be more inclusive or to be more representative. I call it the Lunar New Year, because there are folks in Southeast Asia and in different, even in Malaysia, we celebrate Lunar New Year. Vietnamese people celebrate it. So to be more, I would say, accurate, calling it the Lunar New Year probably helps to be more inclusive of like all the different ethnicities within Asia that celebrate the new year. So it's actually coming up in February. So February 1st, it's the year of the tiger.
Okay. Okay. No, thank you. Thank you.
Most welcome. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions?
This is Dee Dee Strode. The mural is absolutely stunning. I was just wondering, who is the artist or the group that actually did the work?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Dee Dee. We're working on a plaque to put up next to the mural so people know this information. But it was an individual artist. Lauren Young Smith is their name. They're an amazing muralist. This entire mural was actually spray painted. It wasn't hand painted. And so they're a Los Angeles-based artist, and you can look their work up. I'm gonna drop their website, Lauren YS. .org. So we actually did a nationwide kind of call for proposals, and Lauren ended up being selected after a rigorous process. And yeah, we're really glad how it came out. They actually executed this within 2 weeks.
It's beautiful.
Thanks, Dee.
It's a beautiful person too. We have time for one more question. While you are queuing, I put in the chat the Yale China Association's link. They typically host they helm the Lunar New Year celebrations each year. It may have been on hold because of COVID, but there is that particular lion dance that does go down Whitney Avenue that I've always enjoyed seeing. So we do send out information on that through our newsletter, another plug for our newsletter. So make sure you sign up through the link that I shared earlier in the chat so that you can get that information should the event come around again. I don't see any other questions or hands raised. I do have a comment from Joanna saying thank you for this great presentation. I agree. So please, everyone, join me as we end saying thank you to Dr. Yee for her fantastic celebration, all the knowledge that she dropped on us. I invite you to go to the Asian American Cultural Center's website if you want to reach out to staff with any questions, learn about events, join events as they take place as well. So thank you again for joining us.
Informative. It was very informative.
It was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Yee. It was really great to see you all. Yeah. And I will stay safe, healthy, get boosted and vaxxed. That's my personal plug. And I will see you in February. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you.